You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome to a special holiday edition of Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today's romance review marks the 5th episode in Boobies and Newbies' annual holiday special, The 12 Days of Boobsmas. That's right, it's the 5th day of Boobsmas, which, believe it or not, means we are almost halfway through the 12 days of Boobsmas. All month long, we're celebrating the wonderful world of holiday romance books and giving away a few of our favorites along the way. Tune in for more podcast episodes, more reviews, and more giveaways throughout the month of December. And the best way to keep up with the upcoming Boobsmas giveaways, of course, is to follow us on social media at Boobies Podcast across the channels, except on TikTok, where you will find me at Real Kelly Ray. Now, keep in mind that Boobies and Newbies will take a quick break at the end of the year and then return shortly in 2023. In the meantime, you can always catch up on past episodes, including the 12 Days of Boobsmas from years past, by listening on your favorite podcast app or on our website, boobiesandnewbies.com. Also, it's never too late to purchase a copy of my holiday novella, Meet Me in Los Feliz. You'll find paperbacks and ebook copies available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and even a few local retailers. So be sure to check out IndieBound to find a retailer near you that is stocking my book. It's the perfect way to treat yourself or the romance reader in your life for the holiday season. Last but not least, if you feel like sharing a little extra holiday cheer this winter, please consider leaving this podcast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and supporting Boobies and Newbies on Patreon. You will find links to all of the above in today's show notes. And now, on to today's Boobsmas read. Joining me today is a longtime friend, Twilight fangirl, and a writer in the making. Y'all, seriously, I cannot wait to read this girl's books someday soon. Please welcome Bianca.
Hello, hello, dark greetings. I'll forgive you for calling me a Twilight fangirl, but it's the deepest love-hate there is.
I feel like that's honestly most Twilight fans.
Yeah. I appreciate it as part of my vampire awakening, but there comes a time where you start to branch out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because as much as I feel like everybody shits on Twilight, even the people who love Twilight shit on Twilight, but I think I do owe credit where credit's due, because Twilight is one of the first book series that I was really into reading. I think it was my senior year that I read all 4 books, and I just could not put them down. I finished one, I picked up the other, and it was later that year when I went off to college that I started reading adult romance, and I really do think Twilight was part of the reason why.
Yeah. I mean, I had always loved, vampires. When I was a kid, I loved those scary stories to tell in the dark and the goosebumps and all things like that. And then I read Twilight just because the premise sounded interesting, and I hadn't read a lot of vampire books. And at the time, I was pretty young. I was 12 maybe, and it was only just starting to get popular. And I think the first one is legitimately good. It kind of lays the foundation if you ignore the parts where it strays from traditional vampire lore, if you're a true traditionalist in that sense. But the story, what it sets the scene for, is really fascinating. And but my friends started reading it, we all kind of got into that, and then a friend introduced me to all the Anne Rice books. And she's like, okay, this is the real deal. And, you know, ever since then, those have been my favorite toxic, vicarious vampire romance.
That's kind of the thing. And see, for me, I did read Anne Rice, but for me, it was, I followed up Twilight with the Sookie Stackhouse True Blood series, because at the same time, True Blood was starting to air on HBO. And so I had the books, I had the show, but I will say my one complaint is, for as wonderful as those books and movies were and or are still today, damn, did they show us so much toxic love.
Yeah, you know, I am still holding out for a Pam and Eric spinoff. Give the people what they really want to see.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, they never even made it. They never made it on True Blood to the third guy that she hooked up with in the books, who like turns into a fucking tiger.
Oh, geez.
I was like, oh, we're just skipping over this. But I really do think though, like by the time they got to the fifth season, they were just like, yeah, we did enough of the books. We got everybody in to watch the show. So now we can just throw these out and go to town on something new.
That is the HBO way.
Exactly. Well, like I said, someday, I know you're a writer yourself, and I can't wait to, whether you publish yourself or, you know, through the mass market, I am excited to read your books, and I know that the world will be too. But until then, let's talk about the holidays.
All right.
As they are upon us, and we are here to talk about holiday romance, first things first, I need to know, when it comes to the holidays, do you have a favorite tradition and or memory?
Yeah, I have a couple. Every year I like to go to the Dickens Fair in San Francisco. It's at this big event center.
The Cow Palace.
Yes, the Cow Palace, which, why is it called? I don't know. It went from, my mom went to all the rock concerts there in the 80s, and now they just do reptile shows, tattoo expos, and the Dickens Fair.
I just find it so funny, because I love telling people like, oh yes, there's this big Dickensian Christmas event. Oh, that's amazing. Where are they having it? Like at a ballroom, at a, you know, old hotel? No, it's at the Cow Palace.
Yeah. I also love to go check out all of the decorations in all the hotels. They do the giant gingerbread house at the Fairmont. They do a special cocktail list at the top of the Mark bar at the Mark Hopkins. And all of the drinks are named after the 12 days of Christmas. And so that's always fun.
Gosh, see, here's the thing. Even though we grew up in the same town, we went to the same high school, we worked at the same theater camp, I have not lived in the Bay Area as an adult. Like, I spent 1 year there post-college, basically just kind of in transition to what comes next. And then I moved, and then I moved again and again. And I feel like I haven't really gotten to experience a lot of the fun adult holiday events in the San Francisco area, because I haven't really been there for that. So this is enlightening for me as somebody who's from there.
We'll go next time you're in town.
Yes, I love a good theme, and if there's drinks too, all the better.
Yeah, and then, you know, I do the baking thing at home with family. I think my mom's lemon bars are a tradition that other people look forward to, is receiving them, because they are addictive.
Good to know. I feel like I'm gonna need to trade you some of like my mom's cookies for your mom's lemon bars this holiday season. My mom goes for either the thumbprint cookies that have like a jelly in the middle,
those are good.
Or her peanut butter cookies are really good. Like, it's just like a classic peanut butter. So we will make this exchange.
Oh, yes.
Well, since we're on the topic of fun holiday things, I have a little game for us to play inspired by today's read and some of the yummy eats and treats you find in it. So before we play that game, I'm just going to go ahead and clue everybody into the fact that today we are discussing Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrun. And this sapphic Christmas romance was published in November 2022. It's available on Amazon for $13.99 Kindle edition, which I know is a steep price to pay, especially for an ebook. However, I do just want to make sure everybody knows it's a new release. It's a trad pub release, so you can expect to pay a little bit more. You know, when it gets to be that pricey, I almost kind of encourage people to spring for the paperback or maybe find a copy through your library. However, to each their own. I personally think it's definitely worth owning. And we've discussed Alison Cochrun on this podcast before when we covered The Charm Offensive last year, which, if anybody's a longtime listener will know, was one of my favorite books of 2021. So I, for one, was very excited to read this one. I did receive an early copy of the book from the publisher, so thank you for that. And I also have a paperback copy of the book to give away for one of our lucky 12 Days of Boobsmas giveaway winners. So all the more reason to hop on over to our social media pages and enter those giveaways. I'm curious, Bianca, did you read The Charm Offensive? Because I think you would love it.
I did not read it. I'll have to check it out.
Okay, I have a paperback copy. I will bring it home and I will trade it to you with those cookies.
Perfect. I can offer up, I don't know, probably something weird, but
I'll take it.
I'll figure something out.
I will take it. I feel like I don't get enough weird.
Horror anthology.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will take it. You will take this lovely queer reality TV set romance, and everyone wins.
Perfect. Hope you like Krampus.
Oh, ooh. You know what? I don't have enough Krampus in my life, so we're gonna up the Krampus quotient this year.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's play our game, which I am calling Tit or Tat, because I keep things on brand. So anytime we can free the nips or the tits, we're going to do it. So I am going to give you an either or selection of items from the book that we're talking about today, which, by the way, is laced heavily in food and music. Like, I think I could have made every single one of these questions about the different singers and songs they listen to in this book.
And festive holiday drinks.
For real. And honestly, you're going to hear all of that in here. Like I said, this could have been twice as long. So I tried to keep it just to like 10 questions. So we will start here with skiing or snowboarding.
Ooh, I've actually never done either.
Really?
I'll say skiing. Yeah, I've only been to the snow once. It was like on the side of the road in Reno. We took a stop driving home. We went from Vegas to Reno and then took a quick little stop at a turnout near Donner Pass just so I could make a snowball. I did that and then I almost fell because I was wearing Vans. And so we got back in the car.
Oh my God, I love that you didn't even, like, the time that you went to the snow, it wasn't even, like, to go to the snow. It's like, we pulled over on the side of the highway.
Yep. That's why, like, reading the beginning of this book with the magical snow day, I was like, oh, this sounds like a dream. Can't relate.
Well, and I will say this book takes place in Portland, which was obviously exciting to me because I live in Portland. And I know that Alison, the author, she used to live in Portland and now she lives like still fairly locally. So I got a kick out of all the like Portland spots. But this starts and finishes with so much snow in Portland and like this magical wintry landscape. And I can tell you that sure as shit ain't real. Like, we definitely will get, I don't know, a couple inches occasionally, but by no means is Portland, Oregon a winter wonderland. We will move on to something I think you will like more than snow activities, which is boozy eggnog or mulled wine.
I gotta go with mulled wine.
Good
Yeah.
choice. Good choice.
Yeah.
In keeping with that theme, Moscow Mule or sangria.
Ooh. I'm gonna have to go with Moscow Mule.
Okay. That surprises me because I know you're a wine drinker, so I just assumed you'd pick sangria.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little too sweet, though.
Got it. Okay. How about some holiday activities, which are a family snowball fight or a family Christmas karaoke sesh?
I gotta go with Christmas karaoke, unleash my inner theater kid.
Hell yeah, girl. This next one is going to sound weird to start with, but I will say it is inspired by a moment from the book where they talk about different smells. So the smells being freshly baked bread or, to quote, stale coffee and unresolved perfectionism.
Ooh, both are tempting, but I gotta go with the bread.
Yeah, I will say I absolutely would love to have stale coffee and unresolved perfectionism like on a t-shirt. So if that is like a possibility and Alison's listening, please make that happen.
I mean, that's already what I smell like, and
Yeah.
I don't, you go nose blind to your own scent.
Right.
So
but we all aspire
bread,
for freshly baked bread.
Yeah. I do bake bread, not very often, so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, before I get too hungry, putting up the Christmas tree the day after Halloween or putting up the Christmas tree the day before Christmas Eve?
Day before Christmas Eve.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually traditionally, like, throughout history, that's what a lot of people do in different cultures. And at the end, the day after Halloween, since I'm such a Halloween person, I've got a little bit of I'm still a little sad, this lingering feeling of Halloween. It's not quite Christmas time. Basically, in my world, it's Halloween for the whole year, except the month of December. But in December, we're doing a dark Victorian Christmas with, the weird little postcard prints.
You should do what my friend Laura does, who she's very goth. She puts up what she calls like a Halloween tree, and it's basically like her excuse to like put up a Christmas tree during Halloween time, but also put out all of her like spooky stuff that honestly she has out all year long. But she basically does like different decorations for her Christmas tree during the month of October, and then like kind of segues into like a more traditional like kind of decorating in November, December.
Yeah, it's similar to what I do. Like in my room, I have a lot of my little Halloween tchotchkes on my desk. The tree, and I share a tree with like my roommate, and then of course then my parents' tree. When I'm back at their house, it'll look normal on the surface, but then you'll really be able to tell which ornaments are mine.
Are yours.
Yeah, the dragon, the surfing Bigfoot.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Who does that belong to?
Mine are a lot of, I have a lot of food related ornaments, and then I now collect ornaments when I travel. So it's a lot of like weird shit. Like I have one that's a cowboy boot from Texas. I have a bear. There's a lot of animals that I've gathered from different places. Like I have a bear from Big Bear. I have a moose from Colorado. So yeah, it's just it's a wide range of mishmashed animals and yummy eats and treats, but I wouldn't have it any other way. How about, I'm not sure if you're a Great British Baking Show person, but I know that they talk about it in the book because the dog is named Paul Hollywood. And so the question is Paul Hollywood or Mary Berry?
Can I pick Noel?
Because he's the most vampiric of all of them.
He's just my favorite. He's so funny.
Yes.
But I will answer the question. I'll pick Paul. I respect honesty, brutal honesty sometimes.
Okay, but he also
critique.
cheated on his wife with a bunch of people, so I don't know if he's the most honest person.
Oh, I didn't know about that. I'm talking about, constructive criticism when it comes to your crumb texture.
Your crumb. Yes, okay, so Paul Hollywood on the show, Paul, not Paul Hollywood in real life, Paul.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fair enough. How about Elf or How the Grinch Stole Christmas?
How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
That's a tough one for me because I genuinely love both of them, and I usually watch both of them every year. And when I talk about the Grinch, I think of the Jim Carrey Grinch. That's the one I think of, although I did grow up with the animated one that's the 30-minute cartoon. So, but God, I love Elf. It's just one of those movies that I will rewatch time and time again. Okay, this one might be a little more difficult. I know it is for me. Living alone in an Airstream or living in a house with your entire family?
Oh, this is hard because I am so not cut out for the van life. But, if I had a similar Airstream setup as Jack, the character in the book, close proximity to a city and a family's house that I could escape to every once in a while when I got tired of the whole tiny bathroom van life situation, I picked the van life, the Airstream.
Yeah, I think it also, and I know you live with a roommate, Amelia, who, by the way, has also been a guest on the 12 Days of Boobsmas for anybody listening. But I live on my own, but I've lived with, one roommate, two roommates at a time. And it's really difficult for me to think about living with my entire family again after having any little bit of independence.
Yeah.
And so I find it difficult to even just live with a couple other people at this point. And so especially if you could park your Airstream in a place where it's you have access to maybe you live in your friend's backyard, or maybe you all live in an Airstream tiny house community. I think that would be amazing. Someday.
I could do that.
Someday. All I Want for Christmas Is You or Rocking Around the Christmas Tree?
All I Want for Christmas Is You. Got it.
Okay, Mariah.
Gotta go with Mariah.
And then the biggie, which is Taylor Swift or Celine Dion?
Celine Dion.
Thank you.
I'm not a Swiftie. I go to obscure dark wave concerts by myself because all of my friends are Swifties.
Yeah, and honestly, neither of them are my... I'm not a true stan of either. I will say though, I can't imagine not having some of the songs from Celine Dion that we have. Just
I love Celine. I had a cassette tape of Celine when I was little, and I would dress up my Barbies because I remembered the infomercials with her clips of her music videos, and I would dress up my Barbies and they would lip sync to that Celine Dion cassette tape. So
you're just by saying that you're aging us for sure. So if people listening don't know what we're talking about, please do yourselves a favor and YouTube that, because I promise it is worth every moment. Oh, okay. Well, excellent job. I respect your choices. With that being said, I think it's time for us to move on to chitty-chatting about our book, Kiss Her Once for Me. So I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a brief synopsis, and then we will dive into our discussion. Here we go. 1 year ago, recent Portland transplant Ellie Oliver had her dream job in animation and a Christmas Eve meet-cute with a woman at a bookstore that led her to fall in love over the course of a single night. That's a really long sentence, but whatever. But after a betrayal the next morning and the loss of her job soon after, she finds herself adrift, alone, and desperate for money. Finding work at a local coffee shop, she's just getting through the days until Andrew, the shop's landlord, proposes a shocking, drunken plan, a marriage of convenience that will give him his recent inheritance and alleviate Ellie's financial woes and isolation. They make a plan to spend the holidays together at his family cabin to keep up the ruse. But when Andrew introduces his new fiancée to his sister, Ellie is shocked to discover it's Jack, the mysterious woman she fell for over the course of one magical Christmas Eve the year before. Now, Ellie must choose between the safety of a fake relationship and the risk of something real. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to kick it over to you in just a second, Bianca. I will say, because I read The Charm Offensive and because I loved it so much, I knew I was going to read this, like, no matter what. Like, this was a must read for me because I loved that book so much. And Alison Cochrun even told me that she was working on a sapphic holiday romance a year ago, like when we talked about The Charm Offensive. And so I've been waiting for this book for a long time now, keep in mind. And the only other selling point I needed to know that I had to read this book was that this was inspired by the movie While You Were Sleeping, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And I will talk about that later because I think there are some things that if you think about While You Were Sleeping work really well in this book. And I think there's some things that because I kept comparing it to While You Were Sleeping did not pan out as well as I would have personally hoped. But you first. So what'd you think?
You know, overall, I liked it. It was a very, like, cute kind of Lifetime-y sort of story. If Lifetime was allowed to be sapphic, you know, I like a main character that I can identify with a little bit. You know, she's bi, she's anxiety stricken. Who isn't these days? But, you know, all of that was great. I did think, I mean, could have been a little bit shorter would be my only critique. And there were parts where it felt like, okay, we're playing identity bingo almost. Like we're telling their identities instead of showing this representation where it almost, and I know this probably wasn't her intention, where some of the characters verged on caricatures almost, but like it wasn't to the point where it ruined the story for me.
Mm-hmm. No, and I completely understand what you're saying because I feel like and I'll put it in perspective that like I can understand because I just finished writing and publishing my own story that, mind you, is much shorter than this one, but is also a holiday romance. And it was really important to me to have diverse characters in there because one, I want to see characters that I don't normally get to see represented, you know, whether or not that has to do with their ethnicity, their gender identity, their sexuality, you know, across the board, but also because I want to see accurate representations of like the world that I live in, my friend group, me, the people that I've dated, the city that I live in. And let me tell you, I will say, I think the one saving grace for me is that Portland is riddled with queer people. Like I will say what we lack in terms of racial diversity in Portland, which we tremendous lack. It is extremely white. We more than make up for with the amount of people in Portland that identify as LGBTQ. It is very accepting for the most part. And that's one of the things that I've noticed most about moving here a couple years ago. And I love it. Because I will say, I totally agree with you that sometimes it can almost feel like, and I noticed this when I worked in film as well, it can feel like a checklist, like people are trying to just knock off specific identities to make sure that there is representation. And in good faith, I know that Alison Cochrun is a queer woman herself. And so I know that that's definitely a part of her lived experience that makes me feel better about the amount of queer characters in a story, to the point where I know that like that's not what she's trying to do. But I do understand what you're saying in that almost every single person in this book is queer. Like everybody except for like Jack's, like parent, I mean, it's really, except for like the adults, well, I mean, they're all adults, but except for like the older generations that are part of this family, everybody she works with, everybody, she runs into, like everybody is part of like the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it definitely reflects the character of, the city of Portland in that regard. And, I mean, here in the Bay Area, very similar, just maybe like a little bit more diverse, I guess, in terms of ethnicity. I guess it wasn't so much the like, the amount of queerness that made it feel kind of like a checklist, but almost just like that the characters, some of them felt a little stereotypy, but other than that, pretty great representation. I mean, I am not from the Asian American community, but I would be interested in like how people who were of that identity might perceive the book. Like, we would be totally interested in seeing like what they thought of the representation, just because, it's not necessarily, I don't feel that it's my place to say whether it's good or bad Asian American representation, since I'm not from that ethnicity. But that's another thing that was different about this story, having not only one but two Asian American love interests. And that's pretty cool.
I did think it was I know what you're talking about, though, in terms of like having the characters be so upfront and like talk about basically telling as opposed to showing, like when it comes to like their identities.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean, because that is something that like I do take note of, in that I feel like characters should just be able to exist and like date who they're dating. And like, we don't have to necessarily have this whole conversation about their queerness. I do think that has a time and a place. Like, for example, I think the relationship between Andrew and Dylan is a little multifaceted in regards to that, just because like it doesn't seem like Andrew is like openly queer, but it doesn't seem like it's as much of a conversation that he's had with his family versus some of the other characters who have like clearly brought home fellow queer people like as their dates and relationships before. So like I do understand what you're saying, though, and that is something that I personally would like to see less of in future books by any author, is just let the characters be queer. Like their character does not have to be dependent on having the story, like a story about their queerness, just as like a fat character does not have to have their entire character be based on like their weight or like their weight loss journey or like finding confidence in spite of their weight. Like, it's okay for them to just exist.
Right. Like, if they're using they, them pronouns.
Yeah, we can gather.
It's implied that they are non-binary. Yeah. You don't need to do, like, multiple definitions of what that means.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, in terms of when I think about the movie While You Were Sleeping, and let me tell you, I think this is a very difficult movie to live up to in terms of, like, writing a story. And I know that this is not meant to be While You Were Sleeping. It's While You Were Sleeping inspired, turned sapphic, because in fact, Jack is the name of Bill Pullman's character in While You Were Sleeping. So I love that we left Jack's name as Jack in this. But the thing about While You Were Sleeping that is so endearing isn't even the romance. Like, the romance is great. It's all about the family. It's all about her, Sandra Bullock, falling in love with this family, like that she just can't imagine like a life without them, in addition to like this love story. And I will say that's the one thing that I found a little bit lacking in this book, is there were a lot of great moments with the family, don't get me wrong. And I loved that we see this in a lot of stories with queer characters. I loved the element of found family. And I loved that by the end, Ellie moves into a new apartment. She's got like this whole new community of people. So she kind of creates her own family. But that was kind of the one thing that I felt was missing for me. Like, when I think about the source of inspiration, is I didn't see as much of a draw, as much of like a love story with Andrew and Jack's family, because obviously like their parents have like a very contentious relationship. Their dad is just awful. I do think it's hilarious that there's like the grandma and also the new wife of the grandpa, like the recently divorced, and they're like best friends. I think that's hysterical. Like they were probably
they were my favorite.
Yeah,
they are gold.
Exactly. I was like, that's the family right there. Like that's what I love. And then I love Dylan, who is kind of like has been adopted into this family, so to speak. Like they're always there and they have a relationship with Andrew, but it's kind of like weird because they're also really good friends with Jack. So I liked a lot of the people individually, but I don't know if it had that same spark that like I was at least expecting when I hear that it's a book based on While You Were Sleeping.
Yeah, it had come up a little bit on my book talk, and I like to read reviews. Like I'm the type of person where if a book interests me, I'll read it no matter what the reviews say.
Sure.
And people were saying it's the found family trope. And I don't love this trend that we have of like advertising by trope, because I feel like it muddles and waters down the story. And I saw a lot of people saying, oh, it's found family. And yes, you do get a sense of that. And by the end, it really feels that way. But I feel like it could have been played up a little more, and kind of just like on the topic of all the characters and their dynamics. Not that I wasn't rooting for Jack and Ellie. I was almost rooting for Dylan and Andrew more.
I totally know what you're talking about. Because
is that bad?
No. I totally get it, because I'm like, well, damn, I want Dylan and Andrew's book, because the tropes are baked into that too. You have like, Dylan is his sister's best friend, the longtime like family friend. So I'm like, oh my God, I want to know everything about Dylan and Andrew. And again, it's not that I wasn't rooting for Jack and Ellie, but I will say the thing that threw me was that, and this is so funny, I've noticed this in so many holiday romances, is that there's so much build up to Christmas and then like Christmas falls flat. Like Christmas itself is like a drag. And I will say I love that we see Ellie processing her anxiety and like kind of handling it and moving forward following when she kind of like is, exiled from the family and like everything goes poorly. Major like third act breakup moment. But it takes a while, because following her leaving their family from their Christmas celebration, she spends like the next 2 months like basically getting her life together, like figuring out work, and she's gonna write a book now because she's doing this like these web cartoons that have gotten to be like really popular, and she moves in to a new house with all these roommates, and there's so much happening that we speed through. Like it's like the span of 2 months in 3 chapters. Like it's very quick. And then the thing that's off for me with that is like we spend the first 300 pages of the book for like a week leading up to Christmas. So it's just, I don't know, the pacing was a little bit off to me. And the breakup moment, I don't know. It's one of those ones that like you kind of see coming, because you're like, okay, she's keeping a secret, so obviously the secret's going to get out and like, things will be bad. But they had built such a great foundation up to that point that I was like, I have a hard time believing that like these people with this much like emotional intelligence would like just call it quits and like walk away like this. So I don't know. I just found it frustrating.
Yeah. What got me, I guess just because I'm such a private person when it comes to, my personal life and my writing, because I'm such a perfectionist, like writing about this fake relationship as it happens on the internet where people can see it. And you think, well, I'm not popular. I'm not viral. I'm not a big creator. No one's going to see it. But any post could be the one that blows you up.
Popular. Ellie talks about how when she did her previous post that she had done when she had met Jack the Christmas before and they had their like magical one night stand together. She's like, oh yeah, those posts got like hundreds of thousands of views. I'm like, Well, then of course people are going to see these. Like, I don't, but then I will say too, I'm like, Jack, what the hell are you doing going over and like opening up, to like look at her shit and like show everybody like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
poor communication.
all
A
around.
lot of miscommunication.
All around, yeah.
Because that was the foundation. That's how it started between
Yes.
Jack and Ellie, with the whole thing with the surprise wife. And with that, I mean,
that was weird too. I definitely did not see that coming.
Like, I'm trying to think of like what I would do in that situation. Like, no, I'm not super confrontational, but like, I don't know that I would have just said nothing and let it stew and then just ghost,
I know. Can you imagine though, like you just had the most magical like one night stand, incredible sex, incredible like conversations, and then you wake up and this person comes to the door of this Airstream and is like, oh yeah, that's my wife. And like, I am just like, oh my God, like I wouldn't know how to handle that. Like that, I don't know. I guess until you're into that position, which hopefully, nobody will be, but
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the wife did sort of explain, like, oh, it's okay, I told her to, we have an arrangement. And I guess, here in the Bay Area, when you go on dating apps, like, stuff like that is very normalized. But then
in Portland,
you have to keep in mind, sure. Yeah, and in Portland, but, then keeping in mind, Ellie, the main character, she had only just moved here to Portland, and she's only, like 23 at the time? Yeah. So something like that maybe isn't normalized for her. So yeah, I could see how in that situation her instinct would just be run.
Right. I almost wonder like what this book would have looked like if these characters were in their 30s instead of their 20s, because I feel like there would have been a lot of the same situations, but they might have like handled things differently. But I don't know. It's interesting for me to think about, because I think when we talk about like age today, it's so different than what has been portrayed in books and movies and shows of the past. Like 25 is so different in real life than it is from like 25 on film. And I think the same with your 30s. Like there's this idea that like by the time you hit a certain number, whether it's 30, 35, 40, that you should be married and have kids and have your life together and have the perfect job and have a 401k. And, as somebody who's lived in several cities across America, most of which, have a thriving art scene, and like I'm somebody who's in the arts and have friends who are in the arts, that's just not the reality of like so many people. And so when you're talking about Ellie, who is an artist, and you're talking about Jack, who is a baker, in the making, and by the way, would totally go to her bakery because it sounds
totally
amazing. The butch oven. I'm just like, stop it. That's amazing. And I don't know. It's something where I notice it a lot more when I'm reading now. When I read a book and they'll say they're like 23, I'm like, okay, but are they 23 or are they like book age 23? It's like football minutes. Is it real time or is it football time? Like there's a difference.
Yeah, it really is warped. And anyone you talk to because of that is going to have a different perception of where should you be at 23, 25, 30, 35, all over the place.
Yeah. I think about it a lot when I read romance now. I have a hard time reading romance now if the characters are like college age. Like, and that's not to say I won't read a college romance every now and then, but there's just things that like the older you get, you do recognize, and I'm sure it's in reverse. I can see where somebody's probably 18 and doesn't want to read romance about 40-year-olds. Like I get it. I understand both sides of the coin, but yeah. Anyway, I do think it's really fun. There's definitely a lot of funny like one-liners and bits that are in the book. I think Alison Cochrun has like a great sense of humor that really comes across in in the book, both with like the dialogue the characters say and also just in like some of the descriptions. And I'm excited to see more from her, that's for sure. But did you have any specific sexcerpts that you wanted to share? Because yes, there are sexy times in this holiday romance, which we love to see.
Not that particularly, but one scene in particular that I thought was funny, also kind of messy, is when they're in the midst of, you know, holiday festivities with the fam, and Jack and Ellie end up under the mistletoe, and Mima, being her messy self, is pressuring them to kiss. And I think at that point in the story, we don't know that Mima knows that Jack and Ellie have met before.
We love a meddling granny. Like, I love
does.
A good meddling granny.
And it's like, it's perfectly timed to the song lyric, "Kiss her once for me."
Mm-hmm.
And of course they kiss, and I'm like, this is a little cringe, but I love it. Like,
I see what you did there with that title and that song.
Yeah, because like, even if I don't like the song, like, I like a perfectly timed song moment.
Yeah.
Even if it's cringe, even if it feels like something out of like a Wattpad song fic, like, I don't know, it's, even if it's cheeseball, that is the whole point of stories like these.
There is so much sexual tension in this book too, like, let me tell you, because like we do get some flashbacks to when they first hooked up a year ago because Ellie wrote a webcomic about it. So you actually get to kind of like read the webcomic as these flashback moments. And so you do get some sexy times there. Other than that, though, it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of waiting and the occasional like kiss under the mistletoe and oops, like we shouldn't have done this kind of thing. And then eventually they do hook up after, you know, breaking into somebody's cabin for the night, which I was like, well, shit. Okay. The one I wanted to share is when they make out in the bathroom at this bar, because I love a good, like, let me lift you up onto the sink and make out with you scene. So I'll just read like a quick snippet from that. So here we go. I boost myself up and I wind my hands into her hair and I kiss her like I know it's going to hurt later. I kiss her like I don't care. I feel like I'm back in the snow a year ago, tasting her for the first time, learning the press of her mouth and the sureness of her hands and the solidness of her body. It's been a year since we've done this properly, but it feels like we're remembering old choreography. It's muscle memory, the way my arms circle her waist, the way her fingers weave into her hair, the way our chins tilt, the way we arch into each other. She drops one hand gently to my waist, two fingers on the side of my throat. Love a good throat touch. And she's still kissing me carefully. I open my mouth just enough to press my tongue to that white scar, and Jack makes a soft sound in the back of her throat because she's secretly so soft. We both are. My hands search for her softness, for the plush fat of her hip bones beneath her flannel. Suddenly, I don't want careful. I want to kiss Jack while I can before I lose her again. Yeah, I liked that scene a lot because I feel like the one thing I didn't mention that I also noticed in the Charm Offensive was Alison Cochrun's inclusion of having like characters on the aromantic scale or like asexual scale. And I found that I really like that because like Ellie is so into Jack, but she's also very averse to touch or like getting too sexual right away. And that's something that we notice in the Charm Offensive as well. And I think it's something that we don't read enough about in our books. And I would love to see more characters like that in romance because romance looks different for everybody. And I think everybody deserves to have their romance and their love story represented in the media they consume. So I loved that. That's one of the things. And it just kind of shows you that level of trust that they need to get to in order for Ellie to give that part of herself to Jack.
Yeah, definitely. People love a slow burn, and that really can play into a slow burn while showing that type of representation, which, yeah, you don't see that a lot especially in traditionally published. You know, I see it on people's self-published book talk type of books, but, you know, with traditional publishing, it's something that, you know, isn't normally included.
Yeah. So, and again, this is one of the things that I love about, you know, I mean, obviously I've only read 2 of her books. She's only had 2 published books, but this is what I love about Alison Cochrun's work thus far, is just the amount of inclusion, the amount of representation for characters that we don't normally get to see in a lot of our books, our TV shows, our movies, and doing so in a very respectful way, doing so in a very positive way. And unlike what we normally see in like movies and TV shows, they don't die. Nobody kills them. Nothing bad happens to these lovely LGBTQ characters, because that is one thing I am definitely sick of seeing in movies and shows, that's for sure. And so thankfully, I'm glad that we have authors doing these characters' due diligence in books.
Definitely. I'm still not over Willow and Tara, so
oh my
so
god,
yeah,
that's just your I'm unpacking a wound that I've felt for like 20 years. Thank you for that. Any final thoughts about this one before we give this book a few grades? Because, you know, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher's daughter. I'm nothing if not grading.
I'm kind of weird in that I sort of like an unresolved ending. So I kind of wish maybe that it was left a little more open-ended between Ellie and Jack, but that's just me. But, you know, it's supposed to be a cute little holiday romance, so of course you need the happy ending.
Oh, I will say one of my popular highlights that I had was when they do break into that little A-frame cabin, like during the snowstorm, because they need a place to stay. She describes it as Little House on the Prairie kink, and I was just like, oh my god, that is an aesthetic I would love to see in real life. Like I would just like, did you ever watch that show that was on Netflix called How to Build a Sex Room?
No.
Okay, well you should. But also I'm like, oh my god, I want to see them build the sex room that's like Little House on the Prairie kink. Like I'm just envisioning like a lot of gingham, and like, I don't know, dried wheat in like buckets, but then also something on the kinkier side, like, oh, at the end of the hand carved wooden bedpost, there's also like handcuffs, and you know, it's just like I cannot get over the Little House on the Prairie kink. But yeah, like I said, I love her voice, I love her tone, I love what she's doing for representation in her book so far. I definitely want to read more Alison Cochrun in the future. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but by the time this episode airs, listeners will have already heard our review of You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, which I mentioned is part of the unofficial Holigays books this year. And this is another one. So Alison Cochrun, along with Timothy Janofsky and several other LGBTQ romance authors, all put out a series of queer holiday romance books this year. This is another one, and I think we've got one more to go for the 12 Days of Boobsmas. So this year, not only have we seen so many great new queer romances, but we've seen a lot of queer romances set during the holidays, which I am all for. So bring on Holigays 2023. I would be happy with this to be an annual celebration.
Yeah, and let's get some film adaptations, you know?
Right?
They're just as worthy. You know, there is a place for it, and there are people who want to see it.
Yeah, I call it Hallmark After Dark. I'm like, I want the channel. I want the channel that's going to do romance adaptations and original movies and shows and like actually let them fuck. I'm like, we don't need this like kiss at the end in a gazebo. Like, let him bend her over the gazebo. Like, let's get some action in here.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let's give this book a few grades. And so traditionally, we grade for heart, humor, and heat on Boobies and Newbies. And of course, because it is the season, I've added an extra rating, and that's for holiday. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that it could possibly be for you, let's start with heart. What do you think, Bianca?
I'm going to go with 8.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially in like a book that, even though it doesn't have, like, put it this way, While You Were Sleeping is like a 10 when it comes to heart, like that family, that romance. And I think we get a lot of that, but it's not quite to that level. So I'm with you. I'm going to give it like an 8, 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
How about the humor? Because I feel like as much as there is a lot about her anxiety and, some of the stuff that's going on with the family, there are a lot of funny moments.
Yeah, there were definitely some funny moments. Like I said, I thought the grandmas were the funniest
Hysterical.
part. I will say, like, there were times that the dialogue felt a little bit like, when, like, people, like, millennials try to write Gen Z, because, like, the whole time I'm thinking, like, oh, yeah, like, this character is my age. I'm like, wait, no, she's 23. And then I'm like, no, this sounds like something that a millennial would say, not a Gen Z.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, so that kind of detracted from the humor a little bit for me, just because, like, Gen Z's humor is way different. So I would say 7 for humor.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I gave it a 6. I agree with you. I think the thing about, and this is coming from somebody who I've taken comedy writing classes. I've done like comedy writing programs, improv programs, sketch comedy programs. The thing about the best kind of comedy is when you're not even trying to be funny. Like, a lot of it is very situational. A lot of it is just, this character has been put into this specific situation. Oh my gosh, how, weird is this, especially if you have this other character who wants something completely different. Chaos and comedy ensue. So I think sometimes you're right. There were maybe specific lines or moments where it did feel like maybe a little bit forced or contrived. I think the best comedic moments were ones that were just born out of the situations that these characters were in. So I gave it a 6. And like I said, that's kind of similarly how I felt about The Charm Offensive, which also dealt with anxiety and depression as well. Was that there were some really heavy moments, but then there were also some like light comedic moments. So they kind of balance each other out. Now, how about the heat? Where does this land for you? Because we do have at least one open door sex scene. In fact, I want to say there's actually a couple of them, as well as like a few kisses.
Yeah, I mean, there's for someone who doesn't read, any heat or doesn't typically read like, scenes like that, they might find this to be very spicy. And I'm not saying that like I read tons and tons of that kind of stuff either, but to me it felt pretty tame, honestly. So I would say like a 6.5.
Yeah, I gave it a 7. And keep in mind that when it comes to the Boobies and Newbies heat scale, it's automatically at least a 5 if there's at least one open door sex scene. So I kind of like bumped it up from there because we do have a couple of them. We also have like some steamy makeout sessions. There's some great sexual tension, but there's not much outside of the bedroom. Like there's not any like toy play. Like there's nothing super wild that's going on that I think would elevate it to like an 8 or a 9 for me. So I kept it at a 7. And honestly, it's one of those books where I think there's a lot more, God, I hate the word love making than there is like sex. So, it's not my favorite. I will say, I think it does fit the characters. So like, I don't have a problem with that, but hottest thing I've ever read? No, not even this year, not even this Boobsmas, but it's definitely a step up from, I think, a lot of holiday romance. The most important rating of all, as we know, is holiday. So what do you think?
Oh, it was a 10. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
Holiday, because like what every other scene, there's a Christmas song or
actually,
snow,
you know what?
or Christmas
I'm
cookies.
gonna bump it down. I'm gonna give it a 9.5, and the only reason I'm not giving it the full 10 is because their Christmas fucking sucked. Like everything implodes on Christmas Day, and she ends up spending Christmas back in her shitty asbestos infected apartment with her friend who does fly in, so she gets like major kudo points for being like an awesome friend. But yeah, their Christmas itself sucked, so for that you lose half a point.
But in a way, that almost makes it more realistic, because it's always this build up to Christmas. You're stressing about your shopping, your cooking, your everything, having a perfect day, and then the day comes and you just rip everything open and eat everything, and you're
and
like,
then it's
oh,
over.
It's over.
I'm laughing because not only is that so true, but we have talked about that exact thing on at least 2 more episodes of Boobsmas, because it's so true. It is definitely what happens. I will say, I think the last couple Christmases for me have been great because there's been some family that like we're not able to see on Christmas Day. So we see them on like the 26th or the 27th. And so it kind of prolongs Christmas. Like it makes it feel like it lasts a few extra days, even though, you know, it's just a continuation of what you were meant to do on the 25th. So she needs to move out of that apartment though. Like that was honestly the worst part of the entire book, was that crappy ass apartment that she lived in.
Yeah, it made me sad, but again, realistic, you know?
Realistic.
You're struggling. You're not going to live in a big penthouse in the Pearl District.
No. One of the first things we read about is the fact that she pays like $1,400 for her, I think it was a studio apartment, and it's like a basement studio or something. And I was like, I have never felt more seen, because I pay over $1,200 for a studio in Northwest Portland. And mine is pretty great, I think, as far as studios go, but damn, she's speaking facts. Like it's real, and it's scary, and it's awful, but Merry Christmas.
Another thing, I'll talk about inclusivity. More stories need, like economic inclusivity. Not all these characters are going to be living in mansions. I say this all the time, with vampire stories, they're always like aristocratic. They don't have to be rich.
Yeah, you're right. Why are all the vampires like super wealthy? Like I always assume it's because like they've been around so long that maybe they like made really good investments or something. I don't know though.
Yeah. I will say the characters in a lot of my stories are, comfortable, but they don't live in castles. I'm a Capricorn. To quote Renata Klein in Big Little Lies show, I will not be rich, but I'm not royalty.
Yeah. It's the same way I think about ghosts in stories, because I'm sorry, every ghost that I read about or see movies about, they're always like a Victorian ghost. Like they're always from like the 1800s, 1900s. I'm like, where's the ghost that died like yesterday? Like why aren't they around?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. Just these old-timey ghosts out and about. So
there's so many stories to tell.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, everything's been done.
No.
Everything's being recycled."
No. Give me an old-timey, not an old. Give me a ghost that wears like Nikes. Like I'm just like I don't need one more dude in like a Victorian nightgown, So that's something. Speaking of A Christmas Carol and the ghost, there's your update. There's the update I want. I want Christmas Carol modern day ghosts.
Yeah, give me a ghost in an 80s power suit.
Yes, with hair to match, jewelry, all of it. Okay, this is it. We're going to collab. We are going to write a modern day Christmas Carol with ghosts who aren't 300 years old.
Totally. I mean, 80s could work. Like an 80s stockbroker.
Yes. With a brick phone.
Love it.
I'm here for it. There you go. There's our holiday romance we'll be working on for 2023. But until then, Bianca, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. And of course, you already know what's coming next. And that is a little snippet from our 12 Days of Boobsmas jingle composed by the incomparable Cooper Baldwin. So without further ado, on the 5th day of Boobsmas, my lover gave to me 5 penis rings. Merry Boobsmas, everybody.
On the 5th day of Boobsmas, my lover gave to me 5